Maria, if you want to go ahead and get us started off, and we'll go ahead and start moving forward with that. And I was thinking we would have we were getting a little bit of a late start, but I was thinking we would start with maybe let's say about 15 minutes on immigration policy, and then we'll go over to Joanne with the budget.
Okay, sounds great. Well,
okay.
Again, my name is Maria Martinez, and I'm the Executive Director of Immigration Reform Coalition of Texas. And I was actually on the ground at the Capitol the entire session, and we started out with 67 bills related to illegal immigration. And of those bills that were on our list, some were more priority than others. But of those, just looking at the numbers, we had 3 very low priority bills that actually made it out onto the desk of the governor. So you could say that illegal immigration is not currently the priority of this legislature. And that's really where I want to start. The legislature, and I'm going to be really frank here, and please accept my apologies in advance if I offend anyone, but the legislature, from what I've seen, is not listening to their constituents. From what I witnessed firsthand, the folks that really get their attention are those people that bring big campaign contributions to them. They are really influenced by the lobby, and the individuals that were head of committees by Speaker of the House Joe Strauss, they were heavily influenced by the cheap labor lobby. Individuals such as Byron Cook of the State Affairs Committee and everyone on that committee, which included Charlie Guerin. He was probably one of the most arrogant legislators that I have ever dealt with. And I'm just going to sidetrack here a little bit just to tell you the kind of people we're dealing with. Charlie Guerin, one day when I was in his office, he was at the front desk, and I had a conversation with him where I asked him about a certain bill and whether or not he would be in support, where he stood on that bill. And his comments to me were just appalling. And this pretty much will give you, in a nutshell, the way the legislature thinks. His comment to me was, he does not read any bills. And let me repeat that one more time in case you didn't hear that. Charlie Guerin, Representative Charlie Guerin, Fort Worth, I believe, is the district, told me when I asked him about his position on a bill, he told me that he never reads a bill. He said, unless I write it or it's a bill that has come into my committee, and I don't read any bills until the day they get a hearing. That essentially is the attitude of most of these legislators. What we found is the Republican majority is absolutely a waste, because these individuals have not prepared in advance. They are not organized. They don't know how to defend even their own bills. They have not done the proper research, nor have they even written a bill that could hold up to any kind of legal challenges. We found this to be the case time and time again. So we're really hampered. We were very just essentially in a boat that had so many leaks in it that, of course, we would never get anything out of the House or the Senate, because it's that way in both House and Senate. The Republicans were, I can honestly say, they were a non-entity in this legislative session. There was a situation where the final week of the session I had a brief meeting with a staff member outside the Capitol, and he was so frustrated with how everything went that he just opened up and told me the real situation. He said, Maria, we had a bill that had bipartisan support. We had a Democrat that came up to us on the floor, and he said, this is your lucky day, he told him. This is a Democrat rep. We agree with your bill because it is a good bill. It was on human trafficking. And I just want to show you this so you can know what you're getting, what kind of gift you're getting from us today. And what he gave him was a folder that was typewritten. It was an analysis of his bill, researched with all the talking points and a whole list of and the dialogue of the points of order that they could use to kill that bill. And the Democrats have essentially done that on every single bill that Republicans filed this session. So when I say to you that we have a representative in Charlie Guerin that tells us that he doesn't read any bills, this is really incriminating, and this reflects so poorly on Republicans. I got to tell you, if this keeps up, we will never get anything out as far as a conservative agenda. So, I just wanted to lay that out. That's the kind of thing that's happening on the House side, along with just very, very poor leadership. It was clear in the last days that Speaker Joe Strauss was really unprepared. He couldn't muster any kind of response to the Democrat challenges. He didn't have a person that was qualified to even respond to the points of order, someone that knew Robert's rules. And it was very evident that Republicans were just totally unprepared and lacked the will and were really just there as a fraternity. So that was the case in the House. Now in the Senate, it's pretty much the same. If you can believe this, it's really worse than that. While in the House we have some conservatives, the Senate we have much fewer. And as an example of the kinds of things that happen on the Senate side, we have Senator Bob Duncan, who is in charge of the State Affairs Committee. Now, while we have a real villain on the House side with Byron Cook, who's over State Affairs, we have an equally villainous towards conservative issues in Duncan. We have a situation where this senator has given all authority to the clerk of that committee, and basically all senators, House members are required to go and interface with this one person who is a liberal, and it's very well known. She's been there for a number of years, Jennifer Fagan. I was told secondhand that Senator Patrick was forced to go to her with his bill, and she basically told him that she didn't like the bill and it wasn't going to get a hearing. So that's the kind of thing that we were confronted with time and time again. Bills were were sent to committees to die. House Bill 12, while it passed through the House, because it was an emergency bill, it went into the Senate, where it died, not in the State Affairs Committee, but in Senator Tommy Williams' Committee on Transportation and Homeland Security. We were just stopped in every kind of way. We were given the odds were insurmountable, and it's really become apparent to me that if we don't replace a number of these people with real conservatives, individuals that live and breathe conservatism, those that have it deep down inside them and are principled, so that if they get into the garlic room, they don't just become what they are exposed to. So just in wrapping things up, we came away without the Sanctuary City bill. We came away without an E-Verify bill, which are essentially two of the most important pieces of legislation. They were our primary focus, and we've gotten neither of them. The third actually there were three that were the focus. The third one was determining the cost of benefits being given to illegal aliens. That died as well. Now in this special session, we do have an opportunity. Unfortunately, it is become an opportunity because of the recent death of the HPD officer. So there is something that could potentially happen, and at a future date, we'll be able to report back to you what's happened. But all in all, we were not successful in getting more than 3 bills out of this legislative session.
And just to emphasize, Maria, would you spend a couple of minutes talking about the open letter that we wrote to make it clear that these were priorities for the people of Texas?
Yes, absolutely. The letter that you have all seen, signed by so many of you, was hand-delivered to each and every one of the committee members on both sides, House and Senate, to the governor, to the lieutenant governor, and the Speaker of the House. And, we conveyed quite forcefully that this was by far over 70% of Texans want to see some bills come out of the legislature addressing the problems with illegal immigration. And we had a number of legislators that scoffed at us. They told us that the Tea Party was nothing. They told us they, didn't appreciate being threatened. And we had some people that, of course, were very excited to have that. And, we'll be naming those names at some point. Ken, was that what you were looking for?
Yeah, that's good information. Thank you, Maria. Folks, if anybody has questions along the way, we probably got a lot to cover, so we probably are going to be sparing with the questions, or at least try and hold them to the end. But if you do have questions, you can send them. The easiest thing to do is just probably to send them to me at ReaganCoalitionAdmin@gmail.com. That's the email address you received the call-in number and access code from. Joanne, are you online?
I am, yes.
Okay, Joanne, are you ready to give us about 15, 20 minutes on the budget?
I am. Okay, I want everybody to remember that spending in the state of Texas, excess spending has been going on quite a while. And so in order to rein that in, it's going to take us more than one session to do it. I'd like to remind you that over the last 20 years, state spending has gone up over 300%. And if you compare that with over that same period of time with the increase in population and the increase in inflation, that's about 139%. So you have spending at 300% increase over a 20-year period with an increase in population and inflation combined at 139%. You can see that that is unsustainable. We do not have a revenue problem in the state of Texas, period. We have a spending problem. Some of that is connected with this unholy alliance that our local governments have with state government that has the same relationship with the federal government. A lot of the spending is tied to pulling down the maximum number of federal dollars possible. And I think everybody on this phone call would agree that what we're pulling down now is monopoly money. It's funny money. And if we don't stop that, there's not going to be an end to the debt hole that we keep digging in this country. So let me brief you on just the facts as they stand with the budget now. I hope everybody understands that we are, a lot of this is still a fluid situation because we have some fiscal matter bills that have not been passed. And these fiscal matter bills are supposed to possibly eliminate some spending and also provide some quote-unquote fixes to the education funding issue. So I'm going to hit the high spots here, and I will provide updates. I've got a chart that I've worked up with the help of State Representative David Simpson, and I have since had some amendments to that provided by Representative Phil King's office. So I've got to see there's a few minor changes in here, but once I get that, those disparities there reconciled and make sure that my numbers are good, I'm going to send those to Ken so he can post those on the Grassroots Texans website so you can see those. But I want everybody to understand that we have to get our elected officials in the mindset of getting state spending back to those constitutional core functions of state government. We're never going to get a handle on spending if we don't stop growing government outside its core constitutional mandates. Those mandates are public education, transportation, and by transportation I mean highways, drainage, bridges, that type of infrastructure. I'm not talking about adding to parks, bike trails, and walking trails, critter culverts, and turtle crossings. I'm not talking about any of that. I'm talking about directing transportation funds to addressing the issues of congestion in our metropolitan areas and maintaining and repairing preservation of the road structures that we have in place. In order to do that, we've got to stop diverting funds and have truth in budgeting. So we're talking about core constitutional functions in state government of public education, true transportation, criminal justice system, which would include your courts, your correctional facilities, and DPS. I think everybody's clear on that. And then there are certain health care mandates that we have to follow. Okay. Anything above and beyond that, we need to rein in, and we have to do that over time. So that's the first way that we go about getting the dialogue started on this, is to continue to talk about getting state budgeting back to those core constitutional state functions. So now let's talk about some of the things that are still in the state budget that are not core constitutional functions. And anybody that's worked closely with me over this session knows that one of my hot-button issues is this Formula One racetrack funding. This has been one of those aggravating issues where if you look at it in the context of the overall spending of the budget, which is $176.3 billion, a lot of elected officials tell me, well, Joanne, it's only $25 million. But that's real money to most of us. So the $25 million in Formula One racetrack venue funding is currently back in the budget. In negotiations and debate over the budget, about $10 million was stripped out. When it went over to the Senate, Senator Patrick got bipartisan support to strip out the entire. When it came back, though, it was added back in. And I was told by more than one elected official in both houses of our legislature that Comptroller Susan Combs, this was her baby, and it was going to get put back in. The money was going to get put back in. And she was very annoyed at anybody that was trying to have it removed. Well, we don't care about elected officials being annoyed. Our position on this is that it is not the proper role of state government to fund these types of entertainment venues. We don't have anything against race cars, but we don't care if it's funding for racetracks, for donkeys, or for football. We don't want entertainment funded with state dollars. Why? It's not the proper role of state government. The state government is not to be an investment banker, not to be a venture capitalist for these entertainment venues. So, Representative Charles Perry and some other conservative reps have an amendment in Senate Bill 1 that is going to strip this out one more time. So the Tea Party Caucus Advisory Committee sent out an alert today saying, one more time, we want you to take the Formula One racetrack funding out of the state budget. So there's also about $500 million in spending which goes beyond the core constitutional functions of state government, and it is in the form of film, arts, video games, and commercials for Fortune 500 companies. Most of us would call that ridiculous spending. Now, the Arts, Film, and Historical Commission have been cut. I've been told that they've been cut as much as they can be cut without harming the pull down of federal dollars. Again, that's a problem, but that is something that we've got to talk about in our local communities, because we've got to start saying in our local communities, it's wrong to ask your elected officials to go pick the pockets of people around the state to fund something for your community that you are not willing to pay for yourself. That's called legal plunder. We need to stop it. Okay, so going on to other fun topics in the budget. The budget defers about $4 billion. It's between $4 and $4.8 billion for Medicaid. Now, I've been told by more than one person that I believe are to be good experts on HHS, and they say that they believe that this is a conservative number of for the deferrals in the budget. What that means is we have a planned budget shortfall for 2013. I've had plenty of debates with people that I like who are conservatives in the House, and they tell me, Joanne, it's kind of painful to hear you call this a planned budget shortfall. And I simply said, if you know it's going to happen and you let it happen, it's planned. Now, I will say this. Senate Bill 7 has, that Jay Nelson and some others have worked on very hard in the Senate, contains some savings that we hope will cut down this budget shortfall that will arrive at the legislature's feet to deal with in 2013. The jury is out whether or not the combination of bills, if all of them will pass, and if they will actually achieve the savings that are projected. But at least we do have some senators that have worked very hard to put in some cost savings plans. But I have to tell you all that the Medicaid program has been out of control for quite some time. And I want to remind you that the budget shortfall that is projected or the overage, the increase in Medicaid projected in 2014-2015 biennium is actually $14 billion in new cost. So whether I believe that a good solution is to get the federal government to block grant this to the states, loosen those strings and mandates from the federal government and let the states come up with the appropriate way of handling the Medicaid, because, it's not something that we're going to be able to close the door on overnight. Now, the funds for Medicaid, as I said, will run out in early 2013. I had one state rep tell me that it will run out in February. So what we're saying here is that there is going to be a shortfall again. And we anticipate that some people will say what they said to us this time, and that is, well, we have to do the responsible thing and we have to pay our bills. And so that means they'll do a raid on the rainy day fund, because this budget includes spending for 24 months and revenue for only 20 months. Now, I had a senator say to me today, well, we believe that Comptroller Combs is going to certify more revenue. Well, the estimate for revenue, she's already raised it over the past 5 months. She missed the revenue projection last time. I don't see anything in our economy, either state economy or nationally, that would give me a high comfort level that simply certifying new revenue is going to solve our problem. I don't believe that we will hit those revenue marks. I really don't believe that. So the bottom line on the budget is this. We had supplemental appropriations out of the rainy day fund of $3.4 billion to cover the shortfall for 2010 and 2011. It's projected that we will have to get in the rainy day fund in 2012-2013 for $4 billion. We had one-time federal stimulus cuts of $12.1 billion. So when people talk about cutting the state budget, you have to understand that they are including $12.1 billion in cuts that were for one-time federal stimulus dollars. Anyone who constructed long-term spending plans based on one-time money did this state an incredible disservice. There is also a deferral of payments of $4 billion in 2013. That's one of those accounting gimmicks for the permanent school fund that will be due in August of 2013, and they're going to shove it forward a couple of months and pay it late. So that is a deferral. That's another one of those kicking the can down the road gimmicks. So when you get to the bottom line here, for all of the wailing and gnashing of teeth that we have cut so much money, we actually are spending more money in this biennium than the last biennium, and one of the percentage changes is 0.8%, and another one is 0.1%, but it comes down to being an additional spending of between $1.3 and $1.7 billion on the budget. So I think we can say the bottom line for the budget this session was a budget evolution. We are getting more conversation about getting state government back to its constitutional basis and its constitutional responsibilities than ever before. That conversation has not gone on at the level that it has this time, and it's because of all of you. All of you are asking your elected representatives to stop spending and to get the state government back to its constitutional mandates. And we've got to continue to do that. I don't want anybody to lose hope over this. We simply have to, in the 2012 cycle, we have to send some of these people home that don't get the message. And we have to start over with new people who have our same values and core principles. Because in the Senate, as Maria so accurately described, is a real problem in Austin. Time after time, we watched budget amendments debated on the floor, and the Democrats didn't have to say a word. You had senators like Senator Robert Duncan, who talked down pay cuts for state employees who make over $100,000. He had the amendment pulled down for pay cuts for any state employees who make over $200,000. He also had the amendment rejected that called for a hiring freeze. And as all of you know, a hiring freeze is simply a plan to cut your savings based on any vacancies you already have in any positions. You simply don't fill those, and you don't budget for those. So that's what the hiring freeze is. There was an exemption for law enforcement and for the criminal justice system. And even with those exemptions, we still didn't have the support in the Senate to do those common sense things. Our question was, how is it that people who work for the state, who work for the government, are a different class of employee than those of us in the private sector? Why is it that those individuals were not subject to pay cuts? And nobody can answer that question. They attempted to say, well, the best and brightest in state government will leave and go to other states. Well, the snappy response to that is, oh, so they're going to leave the state of Texas to go make more money, but they're going to pay income tax. So, see, that's the kind of mindset that we have down there. And I just encourage everybody to stay engaged, and let's keep watching what they do during the special session. We're going to continue to call for reduction in spending, and we're hoping to get the attention of the governor on some of these issues and perhaps get some, maybe some new calls added to the special session so that we can try to salvage the session. And we're working not only on cost savings and cost cutting to reduce spending in the state budget, but we're also working on the immigration issues. The Tea Party Caucus Advisory Committee wants you to know that we are separate and apart and independent from the caucus. They don't tell us what to say. They don't tell us what to think. And when we get ready to do an analysis of what the session, the regular session and the special session was, we're going to tell it straight. We're going to tell it like it is. That's it, Ken.
Thank you, Joanne. Joanne, we also did an open letter on the budget. How many? I'm sure that the state representatives were just falling all over themselves to answer our letter and explain to us how they are going to stand up for fiscal responsibility. So, how many responses did we receive to that letter that we delivered?
One senator, and it was a senator from Smith County, and he responded after I called the office to say, we really don't appreciate hearing the sound of crickets from your office whenever we send a letter down. So we ended up having a good, a productive conversation about school funding, and this is one point that I need to make, Ken. And this goes back to something that Maria said. We have people down there that don't ask enough questions. For example, the Senate is relying on the opinion of the Texas Education Agency head, Director Scott. He said that the Senate needed to spend put additional $4 billion in education over and above what the House had budgeted for. And when we asked the question, where did he get the $4 billion from? Nobody could answer the question. I said, well, surely it goes back to the 2005 Texas Supreme Court ruling on that quantifies and verifies what the state constitution means by efficient level of funding for public education. I said, so there has to be a formula. Where did he get that from? I said, because $4 billion is a nice round number, so why is it that it is not 3.8 or 4.2? Why is it this number? No one could answer that question. And so the comeback that we had was, well, don't you think that Attorney General Greg Abbott is the appropriate one to determine to interpret that ruling rather than Commissioner Scott? Because Commissioner Scott, the TEA, it's in their best interest to make sure they keep all of the school districts happy. So we need to have elected officials down there that ask common sense questions and don't just take paperwork from a career bureaucrat and say it's gospel and just move forward making decisions based on it. We need to have people down there who are going to question They're going to verify every number put in front of them and stop this just passing along everything just because somebody up the road said it was the right thing to do. We need to have people who can look at every vote they cast as being rooted and based in constitutional, conservative principles and common sense ways of going about things. So, yes, Ken, to go back to your question, we heard from only one senator. I heard from no representatives. I did not hear that letter went to the comptroller, to the governor, to the lieutenant governor, to Speaker Strauss, went to all those people. We got no responses whatsoever.
Just and we had like 2,000 signatures on that one, I think, or close to it.
Oh, absolutely. And the leaders that signed represented way more than 2,000 people.
Oh, absolutely. So that, I think, just sets the stage for kind of the mentality we have down there, that they just see us as a nuisance, it seems to me. Drew, are you on deck?
I am. Sorry, I just stepped outside, so if it's a little windy, I apologize, but I am. And it's quite a setup by both Joanne and Maria for what I wanted to share.
Yeah, so with that setup, I'm guessing there might be some people wanting to know kind of what they might be able to do as far as finding potential candidates, and that's where you come in. So if you could spend a few minutes going over your New Leaders Project.
Well, I think I probably know a lot of people on the call, and hopefully they know American Majority. We started a few years ago as a nonprofit. A lot of us are conservative political operatives, and we realized the problem for the conservative movement was this: it had no farm team. It had nobody at the local level running for and winning seats on the city council, school board, county commission, all the way up, which then means when you get to the state legislative races, even federal races, the conservative movement's looking around going, well, who's next? And it's something that we have made a concerted effort to do over the last few years, and that is we put on candidate boot camps where we come in and we train folks. It can be somebody who has never even thought of running for office. In fact, one of our success stories that I love the most is we had a housewife in Arkansas decided to take on a 16-year incumbent on the school board. She had never even thought of running for office before until she heard about American Majority. She came to one of our one-day boot camps, and we went through fundraising for candidates, messaging, you name it, all the way through what it takes for a candidate to win. She won, and she beat that 16-year incumbent. What we're trying to do is empower the conservative movement, especially the new Tea Party movement, with the tools to win in the political arena, because we believe that, okay, you're never going to find, for the most part, the perfect candidate, somebody that's never going to disappoint you, but you want to start ahead of the curve. In a sense, you want to start with somebody that you know at least agrees with you, because let's face it, when you send them to a state capitol or to Washington, D.C., they confront, and you've heard me give this presentation, what we call the system, and all these different pressures, whether it's lobbyists, whether it's leadership, you name it, that tries to compress or conform them into the mold that the leadership or the lobbyists or the special interests want. But we say, hey, why don't you start ahead of the curve and find those right kinds of candidates, and the best of those who haven't even thought of running for office. Find these people that are rooted in conservative principles, give them the training, and then give them the support structure to go win, which leads me to what we're doing with American Majority is we started the New Leaders Project this last fall, and we have challenged 1,000 Tea Party leaders, 1,000 Tea Party groups across the nation to find 10 people in their communities. It can be from somebody from the business community, somebody inside their Tea Party group that they can identify that would be a candidate, and American Majority will come in and train those candidates to run for, again, anything from school board all the way up to state senate. We've even had a few federal candidates that have gone on and won this last election cycle. So we're actually already at 500 groups that have signed the New Leaders Pledge. So if you extrapolate that for the most part, and some have not quite committed to, finding 10, but roughly 5,000 folks that we're going to go in and train this next election cycle to run for, and we hope, win elective office. So, a lot of folks ask, well, what can we do when you face what we have faced here in Texas over this last legislative session? And that is, you know what? You may have to throw some of these folks out and start from scratch and find the right kinds of folks that agree with you. And again, you start from that right point where you've got people that agree with you, and then you have to hold them accountable once they get there. So, it's something where we're challenging. If there are folks on this call, I'm just going to make a thing here for the New Leaders Pledge. If you haven't signed it, you can go to AmericanMajority.org and sign it, or NewLeadersProject.org and sign the pledge, and then we will come in and train candidates. And you know what? We've had a pretty good winning success with those candidates because it's something where giving them the tools up front, especially at the local level, goes a long way to helping those folks go on and win. And I think one thing, Ken, that you and I have talked about a lot is we are in a time that we have not, at least in my political experience, something that I have never seen or even read about before, and that is this Tea Party movement where it's not just getting the right kinds of folks to run, but it's this new support structure of people that are awakening and understanding, hey, we got to get engaged in this political process all the way through, helping folks get elected, and then, you know, Joanne and Maria were talking about going to the state capitals, going to Washington, D.C., and then holding them accountable. So that's what we're up to with American Majority. That is our focus right now, the New Leaders Project. And, again, I think we're going to catch a lot of people, a lot of incumbents by surprise come March of 2012.
Well, I certainly hope so, Drew, and I appreciate that. Did you already give the website?
Yeah, let me give it again. You get to the New Leaders Project through AmericanMajority.org, AmericanMajority.org, or you can go directly to it. It's the NewLeadersProject.org, NewLeadersProject.org.
Thank you, Drew. Thank you very much. And I think we're going to get a lot of people signing up for that as the message of what happened this session gets out there. I'll tell you, I gave a speech last night to the Irving Republican Club, and I was going to, lay it out there, and I assumed I would have quite a bit of pushback, but surprisingly, I really didn't. I mean, mostly they've been listening in as much as the rest of us, I guess, because they didn't push back much at all.
Yeah, Ken, if I could jump back in, I think Joanne mentioned it. People are getting frustrated because they realize the position that we are in, not just as a state but as a country, it's not tenable. We actually have to do something, and we have these elected officials that are just not responsive, and they think that things are going to continue as they always have. And I think, again, I'm just going to go back to it, I think the quickest, not easiest, but the quickest way to shake things up is, you know what? We're going to reload. We're going to get a new crop of candidates in that actually listen to us, and to be honest with you, they're actually us, and we're going to help them win.
Amen to that. Is Terry on the call?
I sure am.
All right, Terry, if you want to give us some, I know you've got some stuff to cover and actually in contrast to Maria and Joanne, that were kind of talking about things we would have liked to have seen happen and didn't. I think that a lot of what you've got to talk to us about is stuff that we didn't want to happen and did. So if you want to go ahead and take off with that.
Oh, absolutely. We had over 100 bills that we were following during the session. Our session was more like a fire hose where literally it was coming at us so fast and furious that it was very difficult to stop any of the bad stuff. More than 70 of those 100 bills were bad. I mean, not just a little bit bad. We're talking disaster for the taxpayer. So I'm going to go through a couple of these. I'm going to try and do them as fast as I can at lightning speed without overwhelming people too much. But just to give you a flavor, you talk about unresponsive politicians. This is an absolute picture of fiscal irresponsibility. The first one, let's talk about property rights first. That's SB 18, the eminent domain bill that y'all heard about. It was, of course, one of the emergency items that the governor put on the call, at the beginning of the session. And the only good thing that we got added into this bill was changing public purpose to public use. But one of the bad things that happened throughout the course of this bill was that what we really needed was public necessity. What this means is when the government can take your property and hand it over to another private entity for private benefit, there's nothing in SB 18 that keeps them from doing that. They will all go out and tell you now at election time that they got you eminent domain rights, that they ended eminent domain abuse, that we strengthened property rights and all of these things. The single most efficient and effective way to do that would have been to change public purpose, which is very weak. It could be a shopping mall, for instance, and changing it to public necessity. We should only use eminent domain in matters of absolute public necessity on our public infrastructure like roads, like Joanne was talking about before and articulated so well. Well, the public necessity amendment got added onto was proposed in the House and got voted down by a huge majority in the House. And so that just shows that we have only a handful, maybe 24 real conservatives that really do believe in strengthening property rights.
just by that vote alone on the Sheffield Amendment gives us a lot of insight into what was really going on this session. The big problem with the eminent domain bill is that it only dealt with a few items on the remedy side and nothing to really help us on the taking side. So this bill does not help you from the government coming to take your land and giving it to a private entity. As long as they can fall under one of the laundry list of public uses, they can take your land for a museum, a library, for anything, and they can give it to another private entity in a long-term lease where they get private profit, in some cases guaranteed profits, and this is a huge private property rights problem. And there's another bill that dovetails with this that we'll talk about in just a minute. There's also some problems with the buyback language. You might have heard that this bill is supposed to allow landowners, if the government takes your property and does not use it for that purpose within 10 years, that they can, the original landowners can take that land back and repurchase the property from the government. Well, there's vague wording about when that actual trigger can happen. There was an amendment that was added in the House by Representative Lois Colcourse. She's one of the few heroes of the cause throughout the session, both on property rights, on the Trans-Texas Corridor repeal, and on some other issues on transportation, and her amendment got stripped out in conference, and that would have made it so that if the government could take your land and says it's for a fire station, that they can't turn around and swap out your land and keep hanging on to your land for all these different purposes and just end up endlessly hanging on to your property and using it for something that has nothing to do with the original intent. It's basically a huge private property rights abuse to have the government come in and take your land and be able to swap it and use it for anything they want to without really using it for the public necessity that they claim was the first use for that property. There's some other vague problems with vague language in the bill that creates problems for a legal sense. It basically means that the burden to define these terms is being placed on the people of Texas, who may find themselves in lengthy, expensive legal battles against well-connected, well-funded special interests and their powerful attorneys in order to even have something like a bona fide offer be properly defined and have your rights, enforced. So we feel like it was a net loser on the eminent domain bill, and I can give you far more details on that if you want to email me or check out the TexasTurf.org website. The second bill that passed was this huge, monstrous sunset bill. I'm sure that many of you have heard by now that many of our state agencies undergo sunset review. It's supposed to look for waste, fraud, duplication of efforts and things. It's supposed to clean up our agencies and supposed to be taxpayer friendly. Well, this sunset bill was more like a special interest love fest. Just about everything that got tacked onto that bill threw out staff recommendations for reform and put in a bunch of special interest tax and land grants. One of them, I'll start off with these transportation reimbursements. Some running up in Joanna's area right now that she was appalled to find out. Well, this is where the government can come in and designate a certain area or city or town as a transportation reinvestment. And then they can pilfer your property tax appraisal increases to go use it to spend on transportation projects. Well, obviously that means your property taxes are never going to go down when they go and sell bonds based upon ever-increasing property taxes. So that one's using property taxes to build roads now. Then they have a section in this bill that would expand TxDOT's ability to do federal lobbying. There's currently both state and federal laws, but particularly the state laws, what I want to focus on, that prohibit state agencies from using taxpayer money to lobby against the taxpayer. Of course, taxpayer-funded lobbying has been opposed by many groups, not just ours. This actually would expand the ability of our highway department to be able to use our money to lobby for more tolls, more private property and eminent domain abuse problems with these public-private partnerships that we've seen. And so this bill, we've tried to fight that provision in the bill the entire session. In fact, it's been the last two sessions we've the expansion of, and here we are, it passed in the bill. Another aspect of that bill was a disaster was now TxDOT can actually give toll authorities environmental codes. This was the one thing on the environmental front as far as how TxDOT conducts its environmental studies that we tried to stop for the whole session. And again, they threw it into the sunset bill because they had to pass a bill that we could have stopped perhaps on a standalone. They threw into this TxDOT sunset bill because they knew it was going to pass. Well, the net effect of having TxDOT be able to grant clearance for toll projects means that takes away that federal oversight. Just so that people have some background, you don't know about the Trans-Texas Corridor. Well, one of the ways that we have been effective in stopping a lot of unwanted toll projects, or ill-conceived toll projects, if you want to call them that, and these public-private partnerships where they sell our roads to Spanish companies like Cintra, has been through the federal oversight using the National Environmental Policy Act and during the environmental review process, where they're supposed to, have these public hearings and they're supposed to take public input to heart, which, of course, with 28,000 Texans that went on the record against Trans-Texas Corridor 69 alone, that definitely woke up lawmakers, but they were still promoting this project as of just a few months ago. So this is a huge problem by having this fox guarding the hen house. It's going to take away a huge feather in the cap of the grassroots that we've been able to use to stop unwanted projects. So that's a huge problem. But perhaps the worst thing in the Texas Sunset Bill are the 15 Texas roads that are now eligible to be sold off to the highest bidder in these public-private partnerships to foreign companies. So 3 of these contracts have already been signed in Texas, and the same company has received all of the contracts, Cintra, the Spanish company that wanted to build the Trans-Texas Corridor. And what they're doing is they're basically breaking it up and doing it piecemeal under a different name. And by and large, many of these 15 projects are relating in one way, shape, or form to an original Trans-Texas Corridor project that they're now doing under a different type of, name. But it's still the same financing structure that we've seen from day one. So that's the Texas Sunset Bill. Then a companion bill that we were following that didn't relate particularly to roads, but it dealt with public infrastructure of all types was Senate Bill 1048. It was a public-private partnership bill, and this applied to literally every other type of public infrastructure aside from roads, your schools, your hospitals, nursing homes, water supply facilities, ports, mass transit, libraries, even telecommunications and pipelines. So basically they're taking the canker and the cancer of selling our roads off to, all of these foreign companies and turning them into these private corporate toll roads that will charge you 75 cents a mile. Those 3 contracts I was talking about, that's the published toll rates that we know of so far for these types of contracts. It'll be 75 cents a mile. That's like adding $15 to every gallon of gas you buy. Imagine that on top of your $4 a gallon you're paying for gas. It's unsustainable. It's crazy. Well, now they're going to do that with all this other public infrastructure through these public-private partnerships. And Michelle Malkin, you all know, well-known conservative, has all these corporate welfare. Literally, the 2 worst provisions in this bill, aside from the principle itself, is the fact that the taxpayers secure the private entity's debt. And the second thing is that they can use loans from taxpayers. So basically they get to pilfer taxpayer money through a public state infrastructure bank. So that's a disaster in the making as well. So that was a terrible, terrible bill. And we have more to come. HB 1112 is the next bill I want to talk about. This was authored by Representative Larry Phillips. He was the new chair of the House Transportation Committee. If we want to talk about villains today, he is a chief villain for transportation issues. Much of this stuff really happened under the radar. We sent out many, many press releases. We held press conferences. We talked to lots of reporters at the Capitol. We were also on the ground all session long. And we could not get traction on transportation issues. All they wanted to talk about was the budget and many of the emergency items that the governor had put on. But they were not talking transportation, so that's why the public was largely in the dark about what was going on. Well, this bill by Larry Phillips really allows these local agencies to toll you in perpetuity. It basically made legal a practice that they've already been doing, and rather than telling these entities to stop doing the illegal practice of system financing, they made it legal instead. This is what we find all the time when the law gets in the way, they just go and change the law rather than comply with the law. Well, what this does is it takes toll money from, say, Road A, which will be I-35, let's say. They're going to add toll lanes to I-35. Well, that means that they can take the toll revenues and pledge it to another project, let's say on 161 or 183. And then they obligate that toll money to another project, and so on and so on and so on, so that they can never take the toll off the road because it's always obligated to another road. So in effect, it means tolling in perpetuity, and they call it system financing, but that's essentially what it is. It's a Robin Hood tax that raids from one, gives to another. It's terrible public policy. It means your tolls are never coming off your roads. And it also allows these RMAs to use borrowed money to secure more borrowed money to secure more borrowed money, which is the same type of multi-leveraging that caused the subprime mortgage crisis and the financial meltdown that we've seen since 2008. So it's a very, very bad bill. Another bill that's similar to this one because it dealt with system financing as well and making it legal not just for RMAs, but it spread it to all the tolling entities like the North Texas Tollway Authority and the Harris County Toll Authority, those that have been county or regional toll authorities. And that was SB 19, authored by Senator Robert Nichols. They called this the primacy bill. Doesn't sound so bad on the surface where it says, hey, it gives local tolling entities the first bite at the apple if they're going to toll a project rather than having TxDOT control it. So it's a local control bill, but under the moniker of local control, it also means that, in effect, they're going to toll you in perpetuity. It gives these toll entities ownership of that segment of highway in perpetuity. Well, why would a toll entity want ownership of a highway in perpetuity if it's for any other reason other than the fact that they plan to toll you in perpetuity? So that bill gave way too much control to these local tolling authorities, and we're never going to be able to wrestle this tax away from these guys. Now that these two bills have passed, it's not a very good outlook on that. We definitely need new blood there in Austin to get a real sweeping change on the transportation front. I also wanted to tell you about HJR 63. This is coming up as a constitutional amendment election, and it involves these transportation reinvestment zones where they can use your property tax appraisal increases or property tax hikes. These are basically planned tax hikes, and bonds are just deferred tax increases. So they're going to use this to expand this authority to counties. Cities can already do this to you. Can you imagine now having to have your city and your county tax you increase your property tax to pay for these transportation projects that the state legislature has failed to do? So be looking for that on the ballot in November to defeat this in resounding numbers. We really want to see our grassroots folks that are against this sort of nonsense to vote this down in huge numbers. Most constitutional amendments pass. Most all of the time they pass. We very rarely see them defeated. Well, we need to definitely wake up the grassroots on this, and I'm sure there'll be several others that we'll be talking about, but this is the one that's related to transportation. And I wanted to also mention briefly a good bill that did pass. It was the only one that I can come up with that was a good bill that passed, and that's House Bill 1201, and that was the repeal of the Trans-Texas Corridor from the statute. Obviously, we've been told for many years now that the Trans-Texas Corridor is dead, but they never really made it dead in statute, and they still have the authority to do this stuff. Well, sadly, even though they did pass it, which is very good news, that it's out of the code, they just reauthorized it in the TxDOT Sunset Bill by allowing these public-private partnerships to happen, which is the same financing mechanism, and it's the same type of deal that allows them not only to have control of the actual toll facility, but the surrounding property. So that means that Centra or one of these private companies is going to be able to have control of the concessions that go on that tollway, the restaurants, the hotels, the gas stations. It really is the Trans-Texas Corridor, but now they're just not calling it that. So while we get the victory of saying we sold the Trans-Texas Corridor, unfortunately we have a new dragon to deal with from here on out. I also wanted to mention something about HB1 on the budget because Joanne was talking about that, but there's something that also got snuck in there related to transportation. One of the things we had in our open letter on transportation-related issues was not only that we didn't want these public-private partnerships that sell off our roads and make them corporate toll roads, with these sweetheart deals where we guarantee the debt and all of that, and the charge is 75 cents a mile. But the other thing that we mentioned in there, of course, was that we needed to rein in the debt. That's something that, again, has been kind of under the radar for most grassroots taxpayers, is they don't realize that we went from zero debt for roads before Rick Perry, and sadly on the Republicans' watch, including all those legislators that we've been sending to Austin, we are now $31 billion in debt for roads in just 5 years since they sold the first bonds. That is a bigger number than the budget debt that we were facing as an entire state come this last budget cycle. So this is a huge problem. Well, in the budget, HB1, they threw in another $3 billion in debt. These were Prop 12 bonds, and sadly the voters approved these bonds back in 2000, I believe it was 2007 now. It's been a while ago, but they did $2 billion of them already in the 2009 cycle, and now they're going for the last $3 billion that have been authorized. And to talk about, irresponsible funding, where has our highway money been going? Just to give you an idea, I just had an email of an article in San Angelo where TxDOT is going to spend $4 million on a bike trail. Remember, Joanne, where you're talking about what's the real priority for our road money, and it shouldn't be these bike trails and transit projects. Our road money should be going to roads and things that are tied to vehicles and the use of our cars. Well, this bike trail would literally be more than $1 million a mile is what this works out to be. The project cost is $4 million, but the bike trail is not even 4 miles. That's literally $1 million a mile we're spending on paving bike trails when they tell you that there's no money for roads and we have to sell them off to these foreign companies and charge you 75 cents a mile to get anywhere. This is a huge case of misplaced priorities. Another problem with one of the public-private partnership roads that was put into that sunset bill was this Grand Parkway project. And people have been talking about the Grand Parkway around the Houston area for a very long time. We're not necessarily opposed to this project. The issue is, why is it being given priority over the other congested roadways in our urban areas? We found out by looking at the project, they have not only put Grand Parkway in the sunset bill to be a private foreign toll road, but now they've also, we found out, they are subsidizing it with our gas tax money to the tune of $4 billion over the next 4 years. $4 billion. That's the equivalent of an entire new construction budget for TxDOT for a single year. That's how much money we're going to subsidize this greenfield project where there's no known traffic demand, there's no congestion out there. This is really for developers. They've also announced that it's to benefit ExxonMobil, who wants to put their headquarters out there. This really is putting special interest priorities over those of the taxpayers and where we need to have our money going, which is urban congestion and, of course, connectivity in our rural areas. And that's not where our money's going. I also wanted to report some other things about some bills that did fail, because sometimes these sessions are characterized more about the bad stuff than the good stuff passing. Well, even though I had quite the litany that we already talked about today about some of the bad bills, there were some other bad bills, if you can imagine, that we with a constitutional amendment, SJR 13, authored by Senator Chris Harris, that
Hello?
Hello? Ken?
Yes. Is Terry still on, or did she drop off?
It just went dead all of a sudden.
Yeah.
This is Maria.
Yeah, I'm still here. This is Joanne.
Okay. I think Terry lost her connection.
Yeah. God, that was so great.
We're about at the end of of our call period anyway, so she may jump back on. What we can do.
Ken, this is Joanne. Could I tell people I need to tell them one thing I forgot to tell them, to go to a website called taxpayersavingsgrants.org. That's taxpayersavingsgrants.org, and look at the information regarding House Bill 33 by Sid Miller. This is a taxpayer savings grants program that is what we call School Choice Light. It is an opportunity for us to have passed this session the first step in breaking up the public school monopoly and giving parents an actual choice and sending their kids away from failing schools into a school that would better serve them. And there are taxpayer savings involved in this between $1.5 and $2 billion over the biennium. So I would ask people to go there and look at that to get more information, and they can contact me if they want some more information.
Sounds good. Can you give that website again?
Yes, it's www.taxpayersavingsgrants.org.
Thank you. Thank you, John. That's very good. I've actually been talking with those folks, and it sounds like a good program. I'm still learning about it, but I think it would be really interesting.
This is Maria. Yes. Would it be possible to announce the Sanctuary City rally in Austin on Saturday?
Yeah, please do. Please do.
Okay. To everyone who is interested, of course, Sanctuary City legislation made it on to the call of this special session, and because of that, we have put together a rally at the South Steps of the Capitol this Saturday from 3:30 to 6:30 in support of that bill. At the same time, we're also asking for people to call the governor and let him know. We appreciate him adding that to the call, but without an E-Verify bill, that's only half of the problem. being addressed. So we need him to add E-Verify to it, and legislators need to do everything, pull out the stops to get the sanctuary city bill passed, because we literally have people dying. As everybody knows, we had an HPD officer killed 2 weeks ago by an illegal alien who, by the way, had a Texas driver's license in his possession in his name. So there's clearly something wrong with the system. And then just one more thing. Illegal immigration is costing taxpayers in this state $9 billion a year. So clearly it is a budget issue, and there has got to be a way to get legislators to realize that. If they take care of this,
Maria? Oh, it looks like Maria may have dropped off as well. Maria, yeah? Okay. I'll tell you what we can do now. I didn't really receive any questions on email, but what we can do is I can go ahead and open it up so that folks can ask their questions. I'm going to do that right now. In order to ask a question.
Hello?
Hello? Hello?
Hello?
To unmute yourself, press *6, and then go ahead and type in with your question. So you press *6 on your phone, and you should be able to be heard if you want to ask a question.
Hello, this is Ana Diaz with the Tea Party in Beeville, Texas. And I was not aware of these, what did you call them, private, public-private partnership things on the toll roads. You didn't hear anything or read anything about that from the regular sources like AFP and these other blogs. So what can we do now? I mean, it seems like it's already too late to do anything for these bills. What is the next step besides repeal? What do we need to do?
Well, I would say, and I don't know if Terry's called back in, but I can give you some advice as to what I would recommend. First of all, I would get on Terry's list. She's got a website, texasturf.org, TEXASTURF.org. You can get on their email list. And we actually I send out not every one of her alerts, but I send out a lot of her alerts to our Grassroots Texans list. But I would recommend, first of all, to get on that list, because that will be kind of that's sort of the alerts and getting everybody up to speed on what's going on with transportation policy. One of the lessons of this legislative session is we've got a lot of work to do, and really our folks, we learned this time and again, and we didn't talk, Terry and I didn't have a chance to talk about it, but we actually did an open letter on the transportation bills as well, talking about the transportation policy and how we had real concerns and how we actually proposed reasonable alternatives to what the legislature was going to do. Again, I don't think we got any responses from those letters, from our transportation open letter, which just speaks to mentality. If 2,000 citizens actually on that one we had almost 2,500 citizens from Texas put their name on a letter and say, we want to know what you have to say about this, and we don't get one response. I mean, and I'm talking even to our guys that are supposed to be our friends. We didn't get a letter from them either. And I'm not going to say they're maybe the same level of arrogance as some of these guys, but, there's this mentality down there that they're down there to do what they're going to do, and we're kind of, more than anything, a problem. We're a nuisance to them. So, first of all, I think we need to really start thinking about who needs to receive some primary challenges. That would be my number one thing. I mean, from here on out, I'm going to hope to get some things done in some of these special sessions. But my focus from now on out really is to start working on projects like Drew's project with the New Leaders Project, and work to find people to run against these people. And we've actually been working on that in Dallas County and in North Texas to find people to run against the folks that are the problem, because a lot of them are from North Texas, especially in Tarrant County.
Can I get a question in here? Hello?
Yes.
HB 33, this is Charlotte in Dallas, Texas.
Uh-huh.
HB 33, where someone was talking there about breaking up of public schools. What we want, those of us who have put our grandchildren in private Christian schools and so forth, we don't want money from the state to come in because that immediately upsets that balance, and then the private schools will have to be governed by the Department of Education regulations and so forth.
Joanne, do you want to address that?
Yes, I do. That bill is written, House Bill 33 is written in such a way that it leaves 40% of the funding that would go with each child. It leaves it in the public schools, and then there's 60% of the maintenance and operating funds that would be tied to each school child would go to the private school, but there are no strings. The bill, if you will go to the legislative website and read the text of House Bill 33, as it stands today, there are absolutely no strings whatsoever because the grant money doesn't go to the school, it goes to the parent. The parent shops with those grant dollars and chooses the school. So unless
the private schools going to be the private schools knowing that they don't want to be invaded by that's the danger that the private schools won't take them if they are using government money.
Well, if the private schools, this is a free market solution. If the private schools don't want to take the grant, then they don't take the grant, and the student has to go to a school, to a charter school, or to a different school that will.
Right. So it's basically it's really kind of not effective, not effectively breaking up money.
Well, it has the greatest potential to make an impact on the public schools than anything that we've gotten close to doing here in the state of Texas before. This is something that's been worked on for a long time, and because would actually be a savings to the state, but would leave a portion of the money in the public schools. It actually, if you go to that website, it has a great list of frequently asked questions that fully explains the entire program, and it has the policy analysis paper that goes with it, ma'am, that will answer all of your questions. I think that if you'll go there and read it, I don't have time to go through all the little details that are involved in this program.
What is the website?
It is Taxpayer Savings.
Oh, is that one? Okay.
.org. Yes, ma'am. If you go to that, I think it'll answer a lot of your questions, and there are also some contact information there so that you could talk to some of the policy advocates on it, okay?
Very good. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're very welcome, ma'am.
All right. Well, thank you for all that. Do we have any other questions, or are we ready to wrap this one up? I think we're ready to wrap.
Hello. Ken. Hello, Ken.
Yes.
Ken?
It's Dwayne Collins, Edom Tea Party.
Hey, how are you?
Oh, doing fine, my friend. I was wondering, I've been taking copious notes. There's no way I can sit down in one evening and disperse this information to my Tea Party members. Are y'all going to put a synopsis together with the bullet points of what y'all covered? Is that a possibility of getting this information, all this information?
My intent is to take the recording and put it out to our Tea Party folks.
Oh, great. That answers my question.
That's it. But that'll rely on me being able to figure out the technology of it, which is a real touch and go situation.
Yeah.
But I think I can probably get it pulled together, and if I can, then we'll get it posted on the web so anybody can listen in.
Okay. Appreciate it.
Doc?
Yeah. Whoops. Lost you. Hello?
Doc, this is Joanne. And I'm going to be sending out a budget update as well, but this is still changing as the special session wades through those fiscal matter bills. But I'll be glad to share with you any information I already have.
I appreciate it. Thank y'all much.
This is Charlotte in Dallas one more time. I just failed to tell you that I am a member of the Grassroots Tea Party here in Dallas.
Ken, this is Alice Monahan. Can I say something real quick?
Yes, please.
Okay, I just wanted to, for those of you that don't know about the stop or the No Pledge to Joe Strauss video that we put out, if people go to womenonthewall.org, they can see that video, and we're asking everyone to push that out to your organizations. And we have bought airtime for a 30-second spot that will be coming out in Austin, Houston, and San Antonio starting on Monday, and it'll go for 2 weeks. And we really want to push for those state reps not to pledge to Joe Strauss. And I'd like to know your thoughts, too, Ken and Joanne, about the effectiveness. One of the things that we're trying to do is stop that funding from Joe Strauss to these incumbents so that when we bring people in the primary, that their funding will be stopped or slowed down, as it can be stopped. So I just wanted to know your thoughts and let everybody know about that.
Well, Alice, from what I've heard, I heard this recently that pledge cards have still not gone out. I don't know if that's still the case, but that was as of a few days ago. Somebody told me that they had not sent out pledge cards at the end of the session like was anticipated. So we're not. I don't know if that's true, or Joanne may know something about that. But with respect to the money, we are definitely going to have to do some things to counter the money. That means that folks are going to need to be ponying up money for these candidates that hopefully are going to step up. It also means that there's going to need to be a lot of challenges out there, because these guys can fund a few races pretty healthily. But if they're trying to fund, 150 races at one time, it's hard to keep those hard to keep every one of those at $1 million expenditure level. Even for Joe Strauss. So the more challenges there are, the harder it is for these guys to just try and roll over everybody with money. That's my comment on that. Joanne?
Alice, I agree with Ken. I think that one of the best things we can do is make sure that there are some strong challengers to some of these incumbents, particularly committee chairs, that work to stop a lot of the conservative agenda. And I think that if we provide enough vigorous distractions, that will take away some of the money and will make them actually compete for keeping their seat. We also have some things in the works that would involve a statewide effort that we're not quite ready to talk about yet, but our whole entire mission for the rest of the summer and into the early fall and leading up to the March primaries is to get the average primary voter to understand what the activists have had to deal with this session and to give them an accurate read on what the session was like. Because, and the grassroots, the Tea Parties and grassroots organizations have to do this. While we work with and network with a lot of conservative organizations, they aren't as free to talk bluntly and directly as we are, because for a lot of reasons. And so we have to just say it the way it is, and we intend to do that, Alice. So the other thing I would say is that, no, the pledge cards, the last I heard, they have not gone out, and the Democrats have also said they're not going to be willing to sign a pledge card to Joe Strauss. Now, what that simply means is they've raised the stakes. They're going to want more promises in exchange for their signatures on the pledge card.
Right. Thanks for the information. I appreciate it.
Welcome.
All right. Well, I think that'll do it for this evening's call. I appreciate everybody, particularly Joanne and Terry and Maria that participated, and Drew, and for all of you that called in. I'm going to try and do this. It's a little bit of work to pull these together, but I think it's really worthwhile. So if you would, just kind of give some feedback as to pros and cons, and you've got my email address, and you've probably got some of the other email addresses for the folks involved. So just share your thoughts and let us know. and we'll try and improve it and make it more aligned with what people want to hear. So thanks again, everybody, and I will look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.